The Antidote to Wounded Hearts. A warm-hearted story of family, faith, laughter, and love by Margret Knowles. All rights reserved. A dedication. To all the lovers in this beautiful world, you will know that you really love someone when you want that person to be happy, even if their happiness means you are not a part of it. Prologue. Between the past's wounds and the present's happiness lays hope for the future. Eugene had hidden a wounded heart between his ribs. Some people wanted to open Eugene's wounds again. Eleanor wished to include the past, the present, and the future together. Atala was swinging between her duties and feelings. So what did fate say for everyone? Chapter 1. Atala closed her eyes, pretending to be asleep in an attempt to avoid Doria's chatter, who had not stopped talking for an entire hour since the plane took off from Greece. Between the two was Eleanor, Doria's daughter, who was on her way to Italy. Eleanor listened to Doria as if they were on their way to an impossible mission. In fact, they were on their way to Italy on a critical mission, despite pretending that it was just a tourism and harmony trip. Atala was not satisfied with participating in that mission, because there was something in her conscience that made her feel uncomfortable despite all the justifications and noble purposes Doria tried to persuade her with. She felt like she was participating in a dangerous game. Atala opened her eyes after a while and peeked at Doria and her daughter, and then she breathed a sigh of relief when she found out that they had fallen asleep. She was amazed at how they could do that while they were about to deceive a man and manipulate his old wounded feelings. Yes, the goal of that trip was to win back a young man who had a delicate and sincere feelings. His name was Eugene, and the bait was Eleanor, his old love. In the past, she abandoned him and denied his love and passion after her mother's instructions, who always drew her daughter's step in a precision from an early age. She will play on the sword of his old feelings to turn on the old love flames he once had toward her daughter. Atala looked at Eleanor's face. Indeed, she was gorgeous, giving any person the impression of tenderness, innocence, and romance, unlike her true nature. Atala was astonished at how all that beauty could involve disbelief and treachery. She said to herself, "No, I will not betray her. Maybe she is not on the level of ugliness and that I envisioned her when she abandoned Eugene, or on the day she decided to manipulate his feelings to win him back. The real manipulator is her mother and her severe influence on her daughter, always pushing her to implement her will, even when it is obvious that she would not succeed in that. Eleanor is naturally prepared for that and ready to respond to her mother's ambitions and desires." Atala turned her face to look through the plane's window to the clouds extending in front of her, and she asked herself, "How can I imagine Eugene's meeting with Eleanor after all these years since their separation? Will she be forgiven for what she committed against him in the past? Or he might be in love with another girl? Although the information I gathered about him confirms that he was not yet married or engaged to another girl, but that does not prevent his emotional attachment to a girl. She may help him forget his old love for Eleanor and her betrayal too. On the other hand, no. The great love that he loved Eleanor could not be forgotten so quickly because she knew the depth of his feelings. Atala remembered how she felt towards him when she was 15 years old. For her, he was like a middle-aged knight with his tall stature and his breathtaking smile. She did not allow her feelings to be expressed, and she never went beyond the limits of admiration, specifically when she saw a solid and noble affection between him and her cousin Eleanor since they were in high school. But Eleanor's mother stood in the way of concluding that passion in marriage when when Eugene's father passed away. She learned the truth about his financial situation after a short time. The factory he owned was no longer sufficient to pay off his accumulated debts. Therefore, Eugene's inheritance after his father's death did not exceed a few thousand euros. The mother and her daughter's aspirations made her look at all aspects of life as a bargain that must be profitable. However, Eleanor's strange reaction was that she surrendered to everything her mother asked her to do, even giving up on Eugene and looking for a wealthier husband. During those days, Atala was unable, and to that day, to understand that or to accept it. She thought that Eleanor was too attached to Eugene and that she would never give up on him, whatever the circumstances might be. But eventually, she did. Atala later realized perhaps Eleanor truly liked Eugene. Still, that love was not enough to defeat her passion for the lifestyle and luxuries that her mother had drawn for her. She raised her and taught her a lavish lifestyle since she was just a little young girl. Atala's memory never erased that shocking scene when Eugene moved his headquarters from Athens 1 week after the mother refused his marriage to Eleanor. She affirmed without shame that he was no longer suitable for her daughter financially or socially, and that he should look for another lower standard wife. But Eugene clung to hope despite the mother and daughter traveling to Ibiza in an attempt to suppress the feelings of the daughter and erase them in a melting pot of luxurious parties and soirees of extravagance and luxury. Eugene followed them to Ibiza because he was driven by his conviction that Eleanor would never abandon him. He thought that everything was nothing but her mother's personal opinions. The day arrived when the mother and her daughter rested after spending a long day shopping, and they decided to spend some time on the hotel's balcony overlooking the sea. Atala was leaving the elevator on her way to the balcony on the red hotel carpet when the receptionist addressed her. "Excuse me, Miss Atala. Doria and her daughter asked not to be disturbed, whatever the reasons might be. But there is someone who is pressing to meet Eleanor. I tried to convince him to come back later or at another time, but he still insists on meeting her and..." Eugene's voice interrupted him. "Are you Atala the cousin?" Atala turned toward him and saw a person with a shabby shape and a thick beard. She nodded, but she was moved to see him like that. So she murmured, "Yes, I am," he said in a voice that revealed the condition of its owner. "You know who I am, right?" She murmured again. "Yes, Mr. Eugene, I know you." It seemed as if her acquaintance comforted him, so he hasn't to say, "Okay, you have to help me because I want to see Eleanor." She answered, "She is resting now, and I don't think she is." He interrupted her. "Please, I will not disturb her much. I just want to meet her for a few minutes. There is a lot I want to say to her, but I will be quick. I can promise you that. Just help me meet her, please, but without her mother's knowledge." She hesitated not to open up to him about the truth, but he clenched to her, began and saying in a challenging tone, "Please, you do not know how much I love Eleanor. I know very well that she is under her mother's influence, and she will not give up our love with such ease. I have saved an amount of money that we can start a new life with, and if her mother's image differs from what we drew in the past, then it will not be our lives. We will marry and put that cruel mother in front of the reality, and she will understand that we can never live without each other." Atala took pity to tell him that Eleanor was not the type who put her emotions above her interests as he imagined. She gently removed his clenching fingers from her arm and she murmured, "I'll try." With gratitude and relief, he replied, thank you very much. I will wait for her on the balcony." Atala hesitated to go to her cousin's room. Instead, she stopped in front of the room, wondering if she had the right to act as a mediator between Eugene and Eleanor without informing her aunt. In the end, she was the one who took care of her since she was a child after her parents' death. Her aunt repeatedly warned her not to encourage Eleanor to meet Eugene. She constantly reminded her to be Eleanor's caregiver, even though she was 4 years younger than her cousin. She promised her not to do that, but would she keep her promise? Her aunt and Eleanor thought that it was not very reasonable for a person to give up money for the sake of passion. At the same time, she saw that the real ridiculous was for a person to sacrifice those wonderful and true feelings at all costs. Was this a betrayal to inform Eleanor? No, absolutely not. The real betrayal was the betrayal to the trust that was deposited in her by Eugene. She looked back on the hope in his eyes, and she realized that she could only help him and fulfill his desire. So she went to Eleanor's room. Chapter 2. Atala opened the door to Eleanor's room. She found her sitting in front of a mirror, wearing a new dress that her mother had bought for her that morning. Atala murmured, "I thought you were asleep." Eleanor answered without paying any attention or even looking at her. "I could not resist my desire to wear my new dress. My mother's taste is wonderful in selecting clothes, isn't it?" Atala didn't answer her question, as she was looking for a way to convey Eugene's news in the hotel. She wondered if that could arouse her longing for him. So in eagerness, she rushed towards her, even if that was only a momentary reaction. Eleanor's voice grabbed her from her thoughts when she asked her, "Don't you like the dress?" She smiled and answered, "It's so beautiful." It seemed as if Eleanor had noticed something, and she drew a contrite look of regret on her face while saying, "Sorry, Atala, we forgot to buy you a new dress because my mother was in a hurry," and Atala interrupted her in a quick tone, as if she was afraid to back down. "Eleanor, listen to me. Eugene is waiting for you on the hotel's balcony." Eleanor was surprised by the news. She remained silent for a while, and a strange expression appeared on her face, an indication of a mixture between astonishment and annoyance. She stuttered while saying, "Eugene? What is he doing here?" In the same quick tone, Atala answered, "He wants to meet you, and he couldn't come here, so he begged me to ask you to do so." Eleanor looked at her. The smile disappeared from her face, and she turned her eyes back to the mirror. She was silent for a few seconds before a harsh response raged from her lips. "No, I won't meet him." Although Atala did not expect otherwise, Eleanor's response shocked her feelings, so she sharply said, "But he is in a horrible shape, and he didn't ask you for more than a few minutes to talk." Eleanor shrugged her shoulders without turning her eyes from the mirror, as if she was afraid that her eyes would meet Atala's, so she said, "There is no point of talking. What was between us is over, and I don't want us to argue about this." Atala replied, "I just wish the decision emanates from you. Please, do not let my aunt decide for you something like this." Eleanor nervously answered, "Who said it was not my decision? My decisions and my mother's decisions are always consistent. And don't argue with me about this, please." Atala murmured, "But you loved Eugene, and you were planning your marriage and—" Eleanor had a look in her eyes between pain and regret, as if she interrupted her. "It seems that I didn't love him enough. Otherwise, I would not have given up on his love when my mother objected to him. The reality is that I loved life. I love it with joyful affection, luxurious clothes, parties, and luggage, and I want someone who can give me all of that. And we both know Eugene's circumstances. I do not deny that I loved him, but part of that love was due to his richness, which would inevitably enhance our passion and guarantee its growth and stability. As for his new circumstances, our life will be exhausting and tedious. I will not bear it because it contradicts everything I have dreamed of all my life. Maybe I am wrong, and perhaps I seem to you selfish and spoiled, but this is how I am. It is my nature, and I will not change my opinion. As you can see, Eugene does not associate with a girl like me because he is an earnest young man who is idealistic about emotions. He tried to paint me as an imaginary picture, and that tormented me. He burned me with that image, which put me in the ranks of angels, and he always pushed me to pretend too." She hesitated for a moment and then added, "No, not just pretending. I was really trying to be the image that he had for me. Whenever I failed, my guilt increased, and that was exhausting and tormenting for me. I want to live as I am, to be what I really am. Do you realize now that wasn't an easy nor quick decision, nor only because of his financial conditions? I differ from Eugene. I radically differ from him, and when I admitted that there was something of love in my heart towards him, it tormented me for a long time, until my mother's objection settled all the torment and hesitation in my depths, and now I am way better. With hope, Atala said, "Can't you meet him for a few minutes? Tell him at least some kind words." Eleanor's face had taken on a cold, harsh mask as she replied in a dry tone, "No, there is no longer anything to be said." With a voice of melancholy, Atala said, "But he loves you so much, Eleanor, and your rejection will shock him so badly." Eleanor got up from her seat and slowly turned around, looking at her new dress in the mirror. Then she carelessly said, "Time is enough to cure trauma. Go, Atala, go down to him and advise him to forget everything and deal with the new reality, because this is better for both of us. Then come back here quickly to help me choose a suitable dress for the evening." Atala looked at her for a moment, then turned away. Her feelings about her had turned into a mixture of resentment and anger, which she had not known throughout her life. Then she went out. Eugene was sitting in one of the balcony's corners, nervously smoking his cigarette. He wasn't paying attention to the magical sight of the sea and its waves crashing on the blocks of rocks that overlooks the hotel's balcony. When he saw Atala, he threw his cigarette and greeted her with eagerness. She was unable to raise her eyes to him, so she knocked her head and mumbled, "I don't know what to say, but..." He interrupted her. "Did she refuse to meet me?" She positively nodded while he collapsed on his seat and turned his face to the sea, muttering, "No way. Then it's over?" Atala said, trying to cheer him up. "Eleanor is my cousin, but I will honestly tell you that she does not deserve you, as there are thousands of other girls who wish to be with a person like you." He seemed distracted from what she was saying as he repeated in a faint voice, "I thought it was the influence of her mother on her, but it seems that the mother and the daughter are not that different. She did not love me as much as she loved the spoil she would get after my father's death. Is it possible that this is the Eleanor that I loved? Could a person be deceived about a very close person like this? She was like a part of me. Could a part of you betray you like this? Could it be separate from you with all this ungratefulness?" His words moved Atala, so almost crying. She held his hand gently as she said, "Do not rush into your feelings like this. Eleanor did not really have anything of love for you. It was an amputated love in which she shared her strong love for life, of wealth and prestige, other than to live a fulfilling life. For this, her love for you was never real, so don't you ever compare your noble feelings with hers." It seemed as if Eugene had first sensed her presence. He looked at her for a few moments before asking, "How old are you?" His question seemed to her strange, but she answered, 17. He replied while still looking at her face, 17 years old, huh? You are much younger than I imagined, and despite that, you have a mind and heart bigger and wiser than both of them." Her face became red, and it seemed to her that something was running through her body like a delicious shiver caused by his compliment. He continued, "You are very different from your cousin, but who knows if the days will change you or not? Will you keep those beautiful feelings and thoughts, Or will you be like the others when your love comes, and you change your feelings and devour those who give love to you? Her euphoria turned into a feeling of insult, and the shamed redness on her cheeks turned into the congestion of anger. Still, she soon acquired herself, considering Eugene's position, and she answered, "I will not blame you for what you said now, because I understand your feelings. Still, all I hope is that your personal sense does not lead you to make some general judgments about all the good feelings and the noble values that still exist in this world." She felt silence for a moment as she looked at the confusion that filled his face before continuing. "It might surprise you that those words came from a 17-year-old girl, but how do you know that I did not suffer in life more than you? Your father passed away only a few months ago, but before that, you lived in a family that had the means of wealth and luxury. You did not experience the same material and moral deprivation that I did, and you didn't know the cruelty of an orphan in your childhood. You didn't know how life is within others' confines, even when they are related to you, and how they act as if they prefer you to live among them. Still, they push you to fear that one of their orders will be violated, and if so, then you would be accused of ingratitude. They claim before everyone that they treat me as a member of their family, but the truth is different. So I will always be in the second degree. I do not go beyond it in any way, otherwise I will find myself in the street." In bitterness, she added, "This is what a 17-year-old daughter learned since her childhood. I learned what should be said and what shouldn't be mentioned. I learned not to go beyond the permissible limits and how to cope with the anger of others. I learned how to live in the confinements of a cruel aunt and her spoiled daughter. It would have been more beneficial for me than her to dream about the role of the princess, because at least I was deprived of it. But all I dreamed of was a sincere, loving heart full of tenderness, and I still find that rare in this world and this time." He contemplated her with a silent admiration for some time, and then he murmured while he was shaking her hand, "I wish we met in other circumstances. Thank you anyway." She clung to his hand as she felt sorry for him, and she asked, "But what are you going to do now?" His faint smile didn't succeed in hiding his bitterness while he said, "I will try to forget her and start over." He turned to leave but soon returned to her saying, "Thank you again. Your conversation eased many of my wounds, and I needed a person like you in these painful moments." As soon as she saw the tears in his eyeballs, her heart pounded in pain, and she realized that he had received a severe shock. In contrast, she had preoccupied herself by defending her position, forgetting that he was a man who had just lost his place in the heart of the only person he loved. A man was shocked at his pride and dignity. Before she said a word, he turned around and left the place in white steps, perhaps because he was afraid that he would be unable to imprison his feelings for a long time.